Gracie. Okay, I'm sorry. My title is A Vocation of Love, or Vision. I didn't change it on that. I have always been a person who has loved reading, and as I've grown up, I've picked up various genres of books. I've entered many worlds through this hobby, whether that be in the ballroom as Darcy and Elizabeth dance for the first time in front of prejudice, or walking through the wardrobe into the snowy land of Narnia with Lucy, or being on the sideline as I watch Angel fall in love with being God's beloved and redeeming love, or even walking the halls of Hogwarts alongside Harry, Hermione, and Ron as I embark on an epic journey. All the books I have read allowed me to step outside of reality and enter a fairy tale land, yet none has taken a grasp on me as much as the Bible, showing a depiction of the greatest love story I could ever know. Throughout the Bible, you see this love story unfold. It begins in Genesis with God creating man and woman in his own image, breathing life into them, so that they may be in communion with him and take part of the perfect world he had created. Not only did he create man in his image, but he also gave them the loving gift of authority. The fall happens, yet God still shows his love by having given them the choice to decide whether to obey his one request. Even when they break communion with him, he covers them from their now known nakedness and provides for them. Throughout the Old Testament, he creates covenants with his people so that they may have relationships with him, and he constantly brings his people to places of healing and restoration from their own sins. What a loving Father. He fulfills his covenants through Christ and leaves us with the best gift of love we could ever know, a constant connection with him that we each individually get to have. I get to see God's love in almost every aspect of my life. I go home to my family who unconditionally loves me and supports me. I go to a job that God placed in front of me that I love. I can love well because I know the end and have been given hope. But what if I did not get these glimpses of love on a daily basis? What if I was born into a family that showed that they did not love me but actively making choices to not care for me or physically harm me to the point I am incapable of doing normal human actions? Is this love story I know to be true and hopeful still being played out in the lives of those that have not been loved well, and if so, how? Within my job, I have stepped into the world where I see the tension of being loved and unloved and the drastic imprint of our sinful world. Throughout this program, this tension has been hard concept to settle on. Yet I realize I don't have to settle because God is writing the most beautiful love story that shows his love conquers all and absolutely shatters the tension I step into each day going to work. For those who do not know, I'm working at Home of the Innocents. Many of you probably have heard about this company and the impact it has within our city. This company nudges the hearts of all who hear about it and has truly transformed my own. This company has two aspects, one the behavioral side, and then the other the cozier convalescent pediatric center, which is where I work. I'm a resident care attendant, which basically means I tend to the needs of the residents and aid the nurses to the best of my abilities. Within the center, we have 5 neighborhoods. I was assigned to the neighborhood with the residents who have trachs installed into basically their throats so they can breathe. I work alongside nurses, CNAs, respiratory therapists, and resident enrichment specialists to make this neighborhood a home to 15 residents. For many of our residents, intense trauma encompasses the first years of their lives, and it drastically affects them. When I began my work at the Home of the Innocents, I was intrigued by how the residents ended up in a long-term care facility. With any source of curiosity, answers began appearing, and the truth still rattles me to my core. In the beginning, I had to leave the stories unfinished because my heart could not take the harm that was released to these kids. As I go on, I suddenly began to anticipate the horror and become accustomed to these stories. These stories involve such intense physical abuse caused by a kid's parent that has left that child immobile, to sexual abuse that has caused everlasting emotional trauma, that the kid's body begins to shut down, to extreme neglect by parents that results in a kid coming to us only 15 pounds, severely malnourished at the age of 6, or a kid not being watched and being hit by a car, leaving them bound to a wheelchair for the rest of their lives. These stories swarm the center in every neighborhood, and you begin to question God's love story as you hear innocence being ripped from his children. I walk into work and see the brokenness of the world imprinted on every child, and it takes all me to not weep for these kids. In orientation, Hotai, also home in the innocence, prepared me for the possibility of having to grieve the loss of our residents. Like any long-term care facility, it generally becomes the last place where the resident will live. Each day of work holds the unnerving possibility of being the last day for some, as many of the residents have such severe disabilities. Part of my job is helping the nurses monitor the state of our residents, since many of them can very quickly and easily de-stat, and I happen to have to be the first person in the room when this happens. Within my first weeks on the job, a resident de-statted and began turning grayish-blue. Fear racked my body as I yelled for help and pressed the code blue button. This resident ended up going to the ICU for a few months. I began to realize this near-death encounter was common for some of these residents and nurses. We've had a few residents pass away during my time at Hotai, and I watched this family of workers grieve and start all over again, because this is just the reality of the fall. As I questioned the love story of God and the restoration of his people to him, he made himself known very quickly within these imprints of the sinful world that I see at work. My coworkers have been the image of redemption in these resident stories. I wholeheartedly believe I work alongside superheroes. These men and women have been some of the most beautiful reflections of Christ, whether they see it or not. I've seen each of them step into this broken place with gentleness, compassion, joy, love, patience, and wisdom. I wish you could all encounter these people because they love these kids as if they were their own. They quickly drop anything to cover a shift, even if they had worked 4, 12 to 16-hour shifts back to back. Like any kid, these residents test our patience. Yet my coworkers respond with such gentleness and patience that ends up removing any sort of annoyance I might have within me. They walk into work with such joy to be there and make a difference that it causes me to be just as joyful and brings huge smiles to these residents' faces, as you can see in some of them. Each one of my coworkers have given me an insight into what it looks like to fully love someone without expecting anything in return. They have been tools of God to redeem the harm that has happened to these kids and provide a source of safety and parental relationship for these residents. Like Christ, they earnestly go to the castaways and call them into a space of being fully loved and known. A big part of Hotai is continuous healing and growth for our residents. We have physical and occupational therapists that come alongside us as staff to provide resources for our residents. For many, they have tremendous areas of growth, whether that is learning how to communicate even though they can't speak, learning how to walk and stand, and learning how to play and interact with those around them. One of the coolest aspects of this center is that mental development does not stop when a resident enters. Many of them go to JCPS schools, and if they cannot go out to school, we have an on-site school that they will attend until they are 21 and are able to graduate, like he did. Watching these kids develop new abilities brings a smile to my face because I see restoration happening. I know that God is going to restore these now broken bodies to fully healed ones one day. Looking towards the hope of new heavens and a new earth, I realize there are so many reasons to celebrate what is happening now. One thing to celebrate is the growth of this beautiful company. As of pretty recently, Hotai has announced that they are going to be building additional space to our center that creates room for young adults ranging from 21 to 35. This growth is only happening because people amongst the community are fighting for these residents and believe in the cause and the heart of the workers here, which I think is worth celebrating. Another area we're celebrating is that these kids have a family at home of innocence. I'm celebrating because I have been a part of a team that brings safety, joy, love, and hope to these residents, and it's so fulfilling to be part of that. These attributes have taken on many different actions, like dancing with the residents to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, or singing and watching Moana for the 50 millionth time, or playing outside games with residents and throwing footballs, or just being a place of affection, like holding hands and giving hugs. Something that actually happened here is that a worker connects with the resident the most, and that resident becomes their baby. Just last week, I heard for the first time one of my coworkers say, "Oh, that's Gracie's baby," to some of the nursing students who were shadowing for today, and my heart warmed up so quickly. This little guy on the top right, that's my baby. I've seen the way I've become part of this family and become a family to some of the residents, and it makes me celebrate because I now see God writing his love story for each one of these residents, and I get to be a small little glimpse into that. As I look back on these 7 months with Hotai, I instantly smile because God has only grown my heart for this community. I am saddened to think my time as part of this family is coming to an end, yet I have so much excitement because my heart yearns for more. As I look down the barrel of the future, I see my dream of just being a doctor transforming into being a doctor who comes and brings redemption and restoration like I have seen my coworkers do. I see a doctor who comes with a heart overwhelmed with compassion, gentleness, love, joy, and desire to know my patients. I see a doctor who runs to the castaways and calls them into a space of love and hope that I've seen at Hotai. Beyond just being a doctor, I yearn for reuniting with my residents in the new heavens and the new earth, with their bodies whole, and to see them surrounded by the greatest love of all. I yearn to see God's love story for each of my residents become their reality and not just a fairy tale. Sorry. This year has given me even more reason to grasp onto the greatest love story I have known, and I hope to live it out for the rest of my life. Thank you.